Welcome. Today we're going to do a brief overview of human-computer interaction and user experience to give you a grounding for what's going to come over the next few weeks of the class. So to start off, this is a famous saying by Henry Ford, although there's some question as to whether or not he actually said it. But it's really indicative or explains quite a bit about why user experience can be so important. Quote here, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And that really speaks to the fact that a lot of times people don't know what's possible. They don't know what they actually need. And so part of our job in user experience and human-computer interaction is to try to figure out, using various tools and techniques that we will talk about over the next few semesters, help us understand what the users are telling us that they need. A lot of times users are thinking in evolutionary steps, like I need it to go slightly faster, I need it to be fewer clicks, that sort of thing, instead of thinking of revolutionary, which is things like the horse to the car, or more famous in all of our lifetimes is when Steve Jobs came up with the iPod, and that was very definitely a revolutionary approach to music. And so, like I said, over the next couple of semesters, we will be talking about various tools and techniques. We'll be talking about the human, we'll be talking about computers, and we'll be talking about various tools, techniques, and processes that we can use to get the user what they need. I want to start off, though, please strike these words from your vocabulary right now. User-friendly, easy to use, and intuitive. And here's why. User-friendly and easy to use really are meaningless. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten requirements documents that say, hey, it needs to be easy to use. But easy to use is relative. It's very dependent on who the users are. It's very dependent on what they're trying to do. And it's dependent on what context they're in. Something that a novice user might not be able to understand, like a very complicated medical program or accounting program or something like that. A novice user is going to say that's hard to use, but somebody who uses it day in and day out and wants it to be as quick as possible, it's easy for them to use. Easy for them is very quick. It may be some hidden shortcuts and stuff like that, but easy for them is very quick. Whereas for a novice user who's never used something before, and they may never use it again, you want it click by click. More clicks is acceptable. So user-friendly, easy to use, are meaningless without context around environment, task trying to be accomplished, and who the user are. Now, intuitive. Technology is not intuitive, and I understand that most of you who are watching this are probably digital natives. I have two of them of my own who are 16 and 19 now. Technology is still not intuitive. It's not innate to the human condition to understand technology. What we call intuitive is really just familiar and learnable. So if an application that uses common things that we've learned previously, for instance, an application that uses Control-C, Control-V, Control-X for cut and copy, that's going to seem more intuitive. It's not that I just naturally know it with, innate to the human condition. It's that I've used it before. It's familiar. It's understandable. It's something that I recognize and I can move along. Now, it may not be other software applications. It may be that we're using software that mimics something in real life. That's fine. It's the fact that we are taking advantage, when we design things, of conceptual models and interface metaphors that help make technology intuitive. So what are the things that actually factor and influence? What are the factors that actually influence user experience? They are: is the product useful? Is it doing something that needs to be accomplished? Is it usable? Whatever I'm trying to accomplish, can I do that in a straightforward fashion where I know what I need to do and I can get there? Is it accessible? And accessibility is not necessarily just for disabled folks. If the classic example of how something that was intended for quote unquote accessibility actually benefits everyone is curb cuts, which are those little ramps for they were originally designed for wheelchairs, but they help bicyclists, they help mothers with strollers. There's a lot of other people besides the target disabled users. And accessibility with software is very similar. Making things accessible often helps not just the people that were targeted out. Findable. We'll talk in one of the semesters, we talk about information architecture, and that really focuses on findable. Is the navigation clear? Are the words meaningful that allow me to get from one place to another? Valuable, once again, is the thing allowing me to accomplish something that is of value? Credible, do I trust it? And then desirable. Desirable is everything that Apple plays on, in that it's sexy, it's fun, it's exciting to use. So desirable. So we're going to talk about, this class is about human-computer interaction. So let's break down what exactly is human-computer interaction. So human-computer interaction, we have the human, we have the computer, and we have some interaction. And the intersection of those three things is where HCI kind of exists. It's the study of how people design, implement, and use interactive computer systems, how computers affect individuals, organizations, and society. HCI, as an academic discipline, tends to focus towards pure research, but as a basis for, a lot of the things we learn in HCI in the academic world are put forth, you see them in practice in industry under the terms UX, under the terms user-centered design. And so it's, you'll hear HCI used somewhat interchangeably with some other terms. We'll talk about more of those terms in just a second. But HCI, I will use HCI and UX somewhat interchangeably in class, just because this is technically an HCI class. It is an academic course. We will be talking about all of these little pieces, but knowing that practically a lot of you guys who, what this looks like in the industry you're going to go out to, whether you're actually doing user experience or whether you're doing computer, you're being a software developer or whatever, the industry calls it UX right now. And so we'll continue to bridge the gap between those two. But as I said, human-computer interaction. So when we're looking at it from the computer science side, we're looking at things like, when someone looks at my program, what do they see? What do they not see? Can I get quantitative data on how people use the program? What's a typical user doing? And then, looking from the psychology bent, how do my users perceive the system works based on their observations? Does the design communicate actual use? Does the interface communicate what the program accomplishes? And why do users make the choice that they do? And so we'll be looking at how to answer all of those questions. Now, HCI obviously derives from a lot of disciplines. You've got on the human side the psychology, sociology, ethnography. You've got engineering, computer science on the technical side, and then design is kind of where they meld and meet. And we will talk a little bit more about in the more broad overview. We'll talk a little bit more about where all these different, where the players come in, how do people get to this field when we talk about careers. But for now, this is kind of our basic Venn diagram of how we get to HCI. But let's expand on that a little bit, and let's talk about terminology. There's a lot of terms out there in this field. As we said, HCI, it's kind of the study, the science. But then there's all these other terms you hear usability engineering, you hear user-centered design, you hear interaction design and user experience and user research and all of these terms. And we will be looking at a lot of these terms over the course of the semester. So, HCI at the beginning, user experience is very much a kind of an industry expression of that. User-centered design is a process. Information architecture and interaction designs are a couple of places where, when we're actually doing our design work, we get into those areas. Usability engineering, we're looking at the quantitative and qualitative testing, summary testing to see is it working. And so there's a lot of these terms in the notes. So take a look at the notes and you can get, I'm not going to read them all to you, but you can get some more information about all of them. So talking about, this is a really rich field that draws from a lot of different places. And so these are the same diagram. Dan Saffer made this diagram. The one on the left is a little bit older one. Then he tried to reimagine it, and said he's actually still not quite happy with it. But you've got user experience, and it looks at so many different disciplines. It's informed by so many different disciplines, and it kind of, like I said, it feeds from a lot of different places, and you can come into this from a lot of different directions. The flip side, another version of this, somebody else did, looking at this from the disciplines of user experience design. You can be an interaction designer, you could be an information architect, you could be a visual designer, you could be that research scientist, the human-computer interaction that's informing it. Human factors and ergonomics is actually what my background is. So anyway, and we'll touch on a lot of these throughout the semester. Now, changing gears a little bit, let's talk about the process. So this is the wheel. This is, if you look in the textbook, the UX book textbook, which the undergrads are using. The grad students, you're not going to use it till the second semester. This is what their version of the design process looks like. This is what they use. I'm not terribly fond of it, but I leave it here to help you kind of understand where they are versus how I'm going to present it. Really, though, I mean, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. You'll notice that it has a lot of the same pieces that pretty much, no matter what they're called exactly, the UX process fundamentally has designing, it has research, and it has implementation, it has evaluation. So it's not terrible, but it's, like I said, I have it in here because you're going to see it in the textbook, and I want to show you how it maps to the design process that I'll talk about more. But so here, how do they fit into the wheel? You've got all the iterations, the design work, that sort of thing. Okay, great, moving on. So fundamentally, if you're doing design, all of those iterations, we do this divergence convergence cycle, and you'll see that on the next couple of slides. But essentially, you've got an idea, and if you're doing it right, you don't just start with an idea and then polish it, and that's the only thing you consider. You kind of start with an idea, and then you brainstorm a bunch, you do some user research, and then you come up with this whole bunch of ideas now. And then after you've done all this research and looking into the idea, the next thing you do is you kind of start to converge down to, all right, we have all of these ideas. These are the ones that are actually kind of possible. And then once you get there, your next iteration, you're going to diverge a little bit, and you're going to converge. And you do this kind of accordion thing all the way down till you get to your final product. Now, there may be a lot more iterations in your actual process because it is an iterative cycle, but this kind of gives you the idea of what your solution space should look like. Now, this is one of the prevailing processes that you hear about, the double diamond design process. It's been around for a little while. But you'll hear the 4Ds, you'll hear the double diamond design process, you'll hear that a lot. Fundamentally, you're doing research, you're doing analysis, you're doing implementation and prototyping and that sort of thing. And so you'll see that similar to the wheel, you've got design, you've got research, you've got implementation, that sort of thing. It's the same sort of thing. It's the same. You've got the same elements, but this is a common process out there. This is going to be more the basis of what I use in my slides and stuff like that. But the 4Ds, discover, define, develop, and deliver. Those are the 4Ds, if you hear people talk about them. You'll notice, though, you've got the divergence, you've got the convergence, you've got the iteration built in, and you're trying to get from a general problem statement to kind of a specific solution. Now, the double diamond is great, but one of the things that, this particular, it has research, insight, ideation, and prototypes, and so you kind of end up with a proof of concept at the end of this design process. But if you're in the real world and you're having to implement these things, you've got to account for the fact that you've got to implement, and you don't want to lose the good UX you're doing. And so I read an article, and I've been saying for the past couple semesters I need to go find the article again, but this is the triple diamond process. And so if you look at it, the first two diamonds here are similar to the ones we saw on the previous slide. You're starting with that idea, you're diverging on your research, you're converging on your insight or analysis and synthesis, and you get to a hypothesis. And then you ideate and prototype, and you test and refine those prototypes, and you get to the proof of concept. And that's where the double diamond tends to end, as you saw on the previous slide. And so this actually has one more divergence and convergence, where you're actually implementing and you're evaluating. So you're implementing it, if you're doing it right, your UX folks are sitting side by side with your developers as they're building and coding, so that as problems crop up or if they need to make some more decisions. And then that evaluation, you can do kind of summative usability testing and that sort of thing, which in some industries like healthcare where I work, that summative usability testing is required for the product to get out the door. But anyway, so this gives you kind of an idea of what the process will be that we'll be talking about. Like I said, regardless, you've got those 4 steps though. You've got to do some definition. You've got to you've got to discover. You've got to do your definitions. You've got to implement it, and you've got to deliver it. So that's kind of a quick overview of user experience and HCI as we're going to approach it in our classes. Next week we will dig a little deeper into some of the things we talked about here and other parts of UX and HCI and industry. Thanks a lot for watching.